Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii and sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. We're back with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and we have the honor and privilege of bringing back one of our favorite guests, John Chachas. John is a noted businessman, managing principal of Methuselah Advisors, is an investment bank and investment capital partners. He's an expert on the media. His group also owned Gump's, a very famous department store. He's been involved in network and media coverage. He knows media. So when John spoke to me a number of days ago, he raised the question he wanted to talk because he's very upset about what's going on in the media. I'll let John submit his own premise, but my thoughts were, I think the media is biased. I think the media doesn't tell us the truth. I think there's a price to be paid for this media distortion. I think it bewilders, confounds, and upsets and alienates our people. And I think there's a price to be paid for our institutions. And I think the best example, to my mind, of that is a whole disinformation campaign that was created against Donald Trump with Russia collusion funded by Hillary Clinton, the Democratic Party, and the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop. And our friend Miranda Devine exposed that, and then it was suppressed by the media because you couldn't get the true story yet. But those are my thoughts, as humble as they may be, John. I turn over to you. It's your mic.
Well, I have a quite. Let's stay above the fray for a second, and just ask ourselves the question: if we have a contested election in 2024, based on the heat that's in America on each side of the political aisle, who's here today who can actually call it and say this was the outcome so that the people of this country have faith in their democratic institutions? That, for me, is the real failure that has emerged with respect to enterprise journalism. When we were children, you had ABC, NBC, and CBS as licensed broadcasters. You had no cable networks. You had no Fox News. You had no Newsmax. You had no digital news apparatuses. You had three guys: Chet Huntley, Walter Cronkite, and I'm going to forget who at the moment was on ABC.
Eric Sevareid.
No, ABC was Howard K. Smith and Harry Reasoner.
But you had a sense in the country that these institutions were above the circus. They spoke a little different, each one of them, but they were above the circus. We now know today, to your point, everybody has a point of view that the media is no longer reporting in the public interest, but is part of the circus. And the real problem that's going to emerge for Wendy McMahon, who's the head of the news apparatus at CBS, or Rebecca Blumenstein, who's the head of NBC News, I think ABC's has changed about 3 times, so I don't know who's running it now, is that if we have a contested election, meaning we have 3 states that are going to determine who has 270 electoral votes and is becoming the president and running the country, and those states are probably within 20 or 50,000 votes, you have a real problem if the media has been calling it one way and then the outcome is different, because no one has much faith anymore in the institutions of media. That's a real problem. That's a much bigger threat to our democracy than, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or any person. And that's my big worry, which is the politicization of our media apparatus away from being a reporting apparatus and being part of this mess creates real risk. I think you could end up with a country that is so fractured and so angry and doesn't really have any belief in the outcomes. I mean, whether you like or don't like Donald Trump's assertions about the 2020 election, doesn't matter. It's in the rearview mirror. But we have a new one coming up. And I'll just say this. Those major news organizations that are publishing and on every Sunday, putting up on the air the estimates of who they think is leading in what swing states and so forth, they better get it right. They better get it right, because on the evening of the election or the morning after, if suddenly Harris was leading by 4 and then it's a Trump win by 2, or Trump was leading by 3, I mean, you're going to have hell to pay in the country, and it really worries me about the stability of the country. That's really my worry.
My problem, John, is this: I have no confidence they can do the job. I think they all pick their sides. They all have an ideological or political bias. There's either Trump adoration or Trump hatred, and most of the media has Trump hatred, obsessively so. I think the interview at 60 Minutes, where they literally whitewashed her comments and then had a voiceover by the narrator, and they edited out what she actually said, is an example of a taint, a bias by them. I think another example, a recent one, John, also troubling. You had a very pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist interview on CBS, and you had a journalist who tried to do his job, and then he has to go now on an apology tour because the management and the groupies at CBS said, how dare they have a hard-hitting interview with this guy who is pro-Hamas and pro-terrorist. I mean, that's what troubles me, John. I'm not sanguine that they will do their job. I don't think they have the intellectual capacity or the moral compass to do the right thing. How do you solve that?
Well, the statute that governs the licenses, all of ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, anybody that has a licensed broadcast. So this is different than CNN, MSNBC. Obviously, the cable networks have no such constraint. They are a pipe. They will spew whatever they think will generate a rating. But ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox are governed by the Communications Act, and the language is they are to broadcast in the public interest. And at some point, it seems to me that Brian Roberts is the controlling shareholder of Comcast NBC. Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, which owns ABC. Sherry Redstone was the controlling and still is the controlling shareholder at the moment until her transaction closes of Paramount Global that owns CBS. And of course, the Murdoch family controls Fox. These people better think of something larger than their own egos. And look, I hear you. You don't have confidence, and you've just validated the very point I've made, which is I think the vast majority of Americans, if you hired a research firm to really poll them and ask them, do they believe that they are broadcasting fairly above the fray? The answer would be today, it's probably the lowest point in the history of American broadcasting in terms of how people think about the integrity of American news apparatuses. But it is and has been an essential piece of the stability of this nation for 2 centuries. And we could see at the end of this election cycle a very, very close election in a handful of states. And if the reporting is wrong, if it just turns out, oops, gosh, Nevada didn't go blue, Nevada went red, or Pennsylvania we thought was red and now it's blue, and only by 20,000 votes. Unless there's a credible reporting apparatus, I think you risk real instability in the nation and real permanent damage to our electoral our electoral institutions.
John, I agree with that. But let me just throw out one more thing before I turn this over to Eric and then Jesse. If you're counting on the FCC to do the right thing, to do their job, how the hell did they allow George Soros and his family to take over 200 radio stations, which totally blocks out a countervailing voice in this country? You can have 200 more stations propagating left-wing ideological propaganda. And the FCC let them off the hook in terms of procedure to let them do that by. What are your thoughts on that?
The FCC should have delayed the approval of the transfer of those stations until after this election and eliminated that particular risk. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I don't know that there's any basis under which the law would permit somebody to say, oh, sorry, George Soros can't own a broadcast asset. He's not fit for it. But in terms of the timing of it, they certainly could have said, we're just going to wait until after November for you to influence what.
And that was a straight Democratic Republican vote at the commission that allowed that to happen.
As it always is.
Right.
As it always is.
Eric.
Well, John, thank you. This is some great insights. So I just want to come back to your observation that these television media outlets are supposed to air in the quote unquote public interest. It all depends, I guess. It's definitional. I mean, what's in the public interest? You have some government drone who's overseeing these entities, Fox, CBS, ABC, and they think it's in the public interest that Trump loses. So you go say whatever you want is against Trump. Maybe you have somebody who thinks that it's America's in public interest that Harris loses. Now, it always seems that the bias at CBS, NBC, and ABC are always against Trump. But how do you, even if you're enforcing the concept of airing in the public interest, how do you define that?
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
Well, let's start with numerical data. All of the broadcasts on all of these networks, all of their transcripts are publicly available. You can make a request and you can get the actual transcript, every single word that's spoken by, whatever commentator is on the air. And with technology today, it takes you about 15 minutes to set up a set of questions to determine what percentage of their time on the air is devoted toward one party or the other. It wouldn't be very hard to set up, fairly neutral questions and to actually measure it. And if you measured that today on all four of the networks, Fox, NBC, CBS, and ABC, I think what you'd find is that they are no longer reporting equally. Once the fairness doctrine was exterminated in our laws, these enterprises don't have any duty in their mind to report, in a fair and balanced way. They report one side of it or the other. And I don't think anybody could look at that and say that's in the public interest. The question is, at some point, will somebody challenge their licenses and take them to court and ask the FCC and the courts to actually invalidate their licenses? And I don't think that's likely to happen. I really don't. But I stand by where I was, which is, I hate to say it, I hope this election is a blowout on one side or the other. I hope there's 340 electoral votes in somebody's column, whoever it is, because I think the nation, really going all the way back to Gore Bush and the fights over the integrity of our votes, it's really dangerous stuff. And your point is well taken, Eric. It's not easy to determine what's in the public interest, but over our long history, what was in our public interest was that licensed media sat above the circus and wasn't part of the circus. And there's almost no one that believes that exists anymore.
Well, I agree with that 100%. I mean, but the concept of stuffing ballot boxes or election fraud isn't really new. I mean, I guess the best example is 1960. The concept of vote early and often, of course, goes back to Chicago and Mayor Daley in the 1960s. And a very strong argument can be made, and if you go back and look at the facts, Nixon probably won that election. Because if he wins Illinois, he gets his 270. And the reason he lost Illinois is because people were voting early and often in Chicago. And had Nixon, rather than challenging the election, did the patriotic thing and did not, and said, okay, I'm just going to concede. I don't see people, either Trump or Harris, ever being able to rise to
they'll never
that.
do that.
You could say horrible things about Richard Nixon and Watergate and all that other stuff, but at that moment in time, he was a great patriot, and I don't see either of these candidates being emotionally, intellectually, or having the capacity to be able to do that.
I agree with you. I think that, and in many respects, it's the entire apparatus that surrounds them. It's become a blood sport where there is nothing you won't do to try to prevent a victory by the other side, even if you damage the institutions and damage the country. And we are right there. And, really, what really, excuse my French, really pisses me off more than anything is the fact that the media ought to be reporting on itself about these failures. And when I talk to people in the media, and I talk to them often at ownership levels, they know this is true. They know they have lost the faith of the country in terms of their ability to report in an even-handed way so that the masses in this country hear what happened as opposed to what someone wanted to happen. Your point is really important, which is, nobody's going to concede, which is partly why I started where I was, which is I really hope somebody's at 300 electoral votes. So there's just no question.
I agree with that. I think that's a great point. A blowout, I think, serves the country's interest best.
Jesse, what are your thoughts?
What this is all reminding me of is that famous George Bush bumper sticker that occurred when he was facing Clinton. I think it said, piss off the media, vote Bush. I think this year it's going to be piss off the media, vote Trump. But I completely agree. I wish I had an answer. I wish there was an answer of how to instill fairness, integrity, and the tenets of the licenses that John has been speaking about. And John, thank you so much. It's always great to speak with you. As an aside, if you want to get a look, or listeners want to get a glimpse into Kamala Harris's America, just look at San Francisco now. Crime is rampant. Unemployment's at an all-time high. We have illegal migration there. Homelessness is out of control. It really looks like a third world country. And this was a city that was literally one of the shining cities on the hill at one point. But what I find amazing is that we all agree with this. And even more so, we have done polling on this issue. The disapproval for the media right now is topping 54% of disapproval on that. Polling is lower than 40% of American people trusting the media. And the failure of the media to hold itself accountable is what's feeding a lot of these conspiracy theories. Yes. In a way, it's almost as they're feeding into the need and the want for chaos, and that they are able to do that. Think about it. The cable networks' ratings were never higher than they were during the 4 years of Donald Trump.
Well, and the cable networks, as we all know, they're a contract. It's a pipe. There's no regulatory duty to anyone. Just like there's no regulatory duty under any of these digital only internet-based news apparatuses that are literally spewing lies. I mean, on both sides of the aisle, just spewing lies and misinforming the public. But that's part of the reason, to me, that the Communications Act is so vital, and that the preservation of some degree of humility and knowledge of their duty to the country. And I have to say, I've spent 35 years of my life buying and selling and helping people who own television stations and radio stations and newspapers. I have never been more demoralized about the way people think of the reporting. You can hate Kamala Harris or hate Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. If you are in the business of enterprise journalism, it is your job to find a way to report.
Well,
I agree with you. And that's why I like about in the same polling it said about, and I apologize if I overstepped, but less than 30% of American voters thinks that the media provides enough independent context to help determine a choice for the independent, undecided voter. But this is nothing new. I mean, we had a couple of examples of stuffing ballot boxes and all that stuff. Let's just go a couple of years ago where in the 2000 election, CBS ran a major piece on then Governor George W. Bush and a DWI, and I think it was a DWI, or perhaps maybe it was
it was a DWI.
No, it was a DWI.
It was a DWI.
It was a DWI, which was completely debunked. And they knew, and in the analysis came forward that they actively didn't use their own or adhere to their own standards. But then we just look at what's going on here. And maybe this is where cable news networks on the left or the right maybe are help keep people accountable, because
I don't think they're helping people accountable. I'm going to turn for 1 second to the state of Nevada.
How about this, John? I'm a Republican, so I'll take Fox News. When Fox News identifies the mistakes and the polarizing and politicized biased reporting of a major network, isn't that helpful? When they've done that,
I think on the balance, it is helpful. You're right. There is some role that they can indeed play in this, but they are so grounded in their side of the circus. I don't know that they'll change much. I ran for the U.S. Senate in the state of Nevada 14 years ago in 2010. I grew up out there. I know my way around out there. Nevada recently changed its registration laws so that if you have a driver's license in Nevada, we call it the motor voter law, you will get a ballot in the mail, whether you asked for one or you intended one, which means that the largest proportion of Nevada voters, a state that comprises 6 electoral votes, are unaffiliated. They are not registered with one party or the other, which means from the beginning, if you're ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox or CNN or anybody else, and you're trying to measure Nevada, boy, do you have a tough time because there's actually more independent, unaffiliated voters in that state than either Democrats or Republicans. And we know that the state is a complicated state. There's 17 counties. Clark County is Las Vegas. Washoe County is Reno. Those 2 counties will always vote blue. The only question is how blue. And every other county will be red, very similar to Texas where Austin votes blue and everything else is red. But have you had any reporting on any of these networks about how this little state in the West could be, it could actually determine the outcome of the election? And what are those independent voters going to do? I mean, we don't see any of that kind of reporting anymore about Pennsylvania and Arizona and these handful of states which are really critical. And what the news apparatuses ought to be doing is preparing the country that these are complicated states with very different voting apparatuses, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and we may not know until the day of the election, but here's what the current data is that we have. You don't hear any of that anymore. These news organizations don't report that way anymore because they're part of the fight.
Well, gentlemen, I could go on this for another hour, but I've just gotten the sign from the booth that we have to sign off. This is Let the Record Show. We've had the privilege.
I'd be remiss if I don't say that when we listen to this show on Sunday, hopefully the Mets will be one step closer to the World Series. That's all I care about.
The Yankees will already be in the championship series.
And I just want Michigan football to win. But listen, let's be clear, gentlemen. We've had the privilege and honor of having John Chachas on the show with us, a media expert, financial investment guru, talking common sense to our listeners. I want to thank Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, for being with us. Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the State Republican Party, county chair of the Suffolk Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We wish you and your families good health and long life, and God bless America. Thank you for listening.
This is Let the Record Show.